question is about the time it took to make this, the vaccines. Was it fast-tracked, for example, is what someone is asking.
Mhm. Sure. So the COVID vaccines have definitely been gone from idea to manufacturing and will be into people's arms much faster than the usual timeline for vaccines. But that is not because corners have been cut or safety has been compromised. What's happened is that many of these conceptual ideas like mRNA, like adenovirus, have been worked on for well over a decade, in some cases 20 years. And when the COVID virus came on, the researchers or the companies just took those ideas and said, let's apply it to COVID-19. And that made things an awful lot faster because they were going on platforms that were existing. And then also what happened was, a huge amount of funding became available, which is often a real difficult point for vaccine manufacture. And then most importantly, the clinical trials that had to be done, they didn't need to search for patients and wait for them. Which is one of the big challenges in terms of timelines for vaccines. There were lots of COVID patients around, unfortunately, and when testing them, you give placebo to one, you give the COVID vaccine to the other, and you've got your answer relatively quickly. And so that's why things have been a lot faster with the COVID-19 vaccines than we traditionally expect.
I'm assuming too, because this is like a public health crisis, that more resources have been put on finding a vaccine.
Absolutely. So it's certainly true that one of the other things that made things go a lot faster was that there were hundreds of individual researchers, governments, companies that were involved in vaccine development at all different stages. And when you've got 200 people to start with, and now you've got 50 some in phase 2 and moving into phase 3, and we've got already 12 in phase 3, most certainly you're going to have some products that are going to be effective, and that's moved things much faster. Another important note is that because of the pandemic, these vaccines have been studied at the same time as these companies are ramping up manufacturing capacity. So normally what would happen is once they are approved and they're proven to be used, then they start figuring out how do we actually make this to scale. But these companies have done that at the same time, which means as soon as they get approval, we're going to have access to them.
Can you explain the difference between the types of vaccines and how they will interact differently with your body? Do experts recommend one over the other? We know a number of companies have developed these vaccines.
Okay, so there are a lot of questions there. So the first question is about the different kinds of vaccine technologies that are being used here. The mRNA one, there's a protein subunit ones, there's adenovirus where that puts those proteins inside a virus particle to get into your body. They all use a similar idea, which is we need to get something into your body that your body is going to react to. And some of them just put the protein in, and that's the traditional approach. Others will put something in along with the protein to stimulate your body to respond. The adenovirus or the Oxford vaccine puts it inside non-harmful adenovirus, which is like a cold virus, in order to get it in. And the mRNA vaccines put a code, the genetic code for that protein, into a little fat globule, and then that's what goes into the body. And the mRNA goes into your cell, your body will make that protein, and then your body will fight off against that protein. So it is true that both the mRNA technology and the adenovirus, saying it's traditional is sort of funny because it really hasn't really been used either, but is a little bit older technology than the mRNA vaccine. But there's no reason to suspect that the mRNA one is, for example, is going to be incorporated into your DNA and then is going to have long-term effects. That is being studied, certainly, and that's why we're doing clinical trials that look at safety and efficacy. But the mRNA molecule is a very fickle molecule. That's why it has to be stored at -20 or -80, is it doesn't last very long. And in order for mRNA to get turned into DNA, it's a whole complex process that actually human cells really don't do. And so from a theoretical perspective, we think, and we have good reason to believe that mRNA vaccine, that mRNA goes in there, creates the protein, your body, makes something to fight against it, and you'll hopefully be protected. And it's not expected to have long-term side effects, but that is under study, and reasonable people would wonder about that, absolutely.
So somebody has a question about the efficiency rate. If I get the vaccine, can I still contract the virus and spread it while not developing symptoms? If I get the vaccine, but my family doesn't, can I still contract the virus and spread it?
So we don't know all the answers right now about each specific vaccine, or still about how our immune system interacts with the COVID-19 virus. We certainly have good evidence from at least 3 trials, the 2 mRNA and the AstraZeneca one, that it provides good protection. It's not just in theory that it makes antibodies, because we had that from phase 2. Now at phase 3, we know it does protect people. We don't really understand how well it protects people yet, whether it just means that everybody is going to get less sick, whether it's going to be absolutely the case that people don't get it. I think it's reasonable to assume right now that all of the vaccines that are proven to be effective are going to either prevent you from getting ill, or at the very least prevent you from getting very ill. And the less ill that you are, the less you're producing virus, the less likely you are to pass that on. We don't have the details exactly of that yet, but I think we will within a couple of months.
Next question, we got a lot of these about side effects, vaccine side effects.
So the vaccines that are almost ready to be delivered into people's arms right now, the Pfizer and the Moderna and the AstraZeneca one, and the ones that are upcoming soon now, have at least 2 months of safety data associated with them. So we know that they are safe, up to the first 2 months. And as things roll out, in the UK right now, they're getting them, and we'll have an extra month or 2 of safety data really there before, Canadians start getting the vaccine. But, they have proven to be safe and effective for now. Again, the long-term side effects, we don't have a lot of vaccines, or any vaccines really, that have long-term side effects as far as we know right now. And we've given billions of doses of vaccines over the past 50, 70 years. And so we have a lot of excellent data from vaccines in general. These are new technologies, but we can go with what we know already, is that we really look for those short-term side effects, and most of them right now have been soreness of the arm, a little bit of potentially a fever, and that really just shows that the vaccine is working. But I don't expect long-term side effects, but 100% that is something that every regulator around the world is going to be monitoring. That's called a phase 4 study, where after you prove it effective, you put it into people's arms, but you very carefully monitor what's going on. So, before Canadians in the general population are going to get this vaccine, we'll know a lot more. But I personally am quite confident in my knowledge about the way Health Canada works, and our public health authorities and our governments, that I trust and would get the vaccine myself if I were in a priority line.
Got it. Some people have also been asking about what's in this vaccine. Is it the virus? Is it what exactly is in the vaccine itself, or the vaccines?
Mm-hmm. So it's a great question, what's actually in there. And other than the main ingredients, I don't have a whole list right now, and that's exactly what Health Canada is looking at. But I can definitely tell you that none of the vaccines that are currently being studied are live vaccines. In other words, none of them put a live vaccine into you and through that generate immunity. So 3 vaccines that do put a live attenuated vaccine, so a vaccine that does not cause disease, but that actually causes a very good response, are measles, mumps, and rubella. But we know those are exceptionally safe vaccines, and the great thing about them is actually they're very safe and very effective. So if we had a live COVID-19 vaccine that was studied, I would think that would be a great development. But none of the vaccines right now are live and cannot cause disease related to COVID-19 itself.
I've got questions about microchips. That's another one.
Yeah, so one of the challenges about doing a myths and facts session is that people, it reinforces myths sometimes, and certainly there are no microchips in any of these vaccines. The idea that it is a conspiracy to harm anyone in any way, or to track people in any way, is just really not true. There are lots of people online who will say that, and I honestly am not sure what their goal is, because right now, we as a planet, there are very few things we've seen in the history of humanity where we're so focused on one goal, which is to create a safe and effective vaccine and to see our world go back to the way it was. And our best way of doing that, in the long term, certainly. In the short term, it's the masks, the distancing, and everything we're doing to protect ourselves. But in the long term, it is very likely that it's the vaccine. And I think we can have confidence in our governments, in our health institutions, Health Canada, Public Health, that it is going to be a safe vaccine, that it is not some nefarious plot from either Big Pharma or any other organization or government to harm us in any way.
Okay, I got a couple of these questions too. People want to know the vaccines that are being rolled out around the world, here in Canada also. What are they going to do? Are they protecting you against the virus? Are they protecting you from giving the virus? Or are they kind of ways to heal you from the virus?
Right. So these are not therapeutic vaccines. In other words, if you have COVID already, we're not going to be giving you the vaccine, likely, although that remains to be seen, but not likely. Therapeutic vaccines, that's not how they're designed. They are to protect you. So in other words, you have somebody who's not had COVID-19 yet, you get one of these vaccines, your body mounts an immune response to it after 2 doses, for the most part, as far as we know, one now, one in 21 days or in a month. You get a prime and then a boost. Your body will fight off the virus if it were to come in contact with your body. And in that way would protect you from getting the disease. Now, it is certainly possible, and this is what we might see, and is the case with some other viruses, that there are certain situations in which you can get a milder form of the disease, but you'll not get as sick. And some of the vaccines thus far have showed not only do they protect people from getting it, but they also protect people from more severe disease. So even if people get it, they're not as likely to go into the ICU or go into the hospitals, and that really is equally important. However, when we do get the virus itself, when it multiplies, the more likely we are to transmit it. And the goal with most of these vaccines is to prevent the virus from multiplying. And a natural result of that would be that it's not as transmissible.
You touched on this a little bit. If someone had COVID, should they be getting this vaccine?
If someone had COVID, I don't think we're going to be offering the vaccine to them right now. We genuinely don't know the degree of protection that is afforded to people who've had COVID already. It makes sense for most diseases, many diseases, that if you've had the disease already, you're immune to it again a second time. But we certainly have seen across the world situations in which people have got the vaccine twice, and we have seen that immunity wanes over time. In other words, the immunity from natural infection seems to go down over time, and it is possible to get it twice. So I don't think people who've had COVID-19 already are going to be first in line, or maybe even 5th to 10th in line, but that's something we are definitely going to look at, I think, as this rolls out over the next 6 to 9 months.
And just going hand in hand with that, someone's asking if there's a new medicine or procedure to help those who contract the virus as well, or is it just the usual and hopefully people recover?
Well, with respect to COVID-19 treatment, there isn't really a usual. So, our treatment algorithms for that have developed quite a bit over time, whether it means using steroids or other supportive measures. But also there are a number of antibody treatments that have been approved. Now, from what I've read and the studies that I've seen, they're marginally beneficial for the people who are most sick some of the time. So they don't work very well, but there's all kinds of therapies that are being tried out now, and some are proving to be modestly effective, others not effective at all, as we saw with hydroxychloroquine and a number of other therapeutics. But there's continuing work on that. But I think we really want to protect people from getting the virus in the first place, and at least as a public health person, the effort to treat those who already have it is critically important, but somewhat less important from a public health perspective.
The next question is about vaccines. Have they been tested and proven safe for women of reproductive age?
So the vaccines right now have not been tested in children, and those trials are going on right now. Women who are either pregnant or of reproductive age, those are, reasonable questions. They certainly have been tested in women who are of reproductive age. Those people, women between the ages of, 18 and 45 were in the trials. Whether it's safe for pregnant women, I think the definitive data on that remains to be seen. But there's no indication that it would be harmful right now. So we certainly do know that many other vaccines are critically important for people to take when they're pregnant. Those include the influenza vaccine and the pertussis vaccine, which we specifically give to people who, when they're pregnant, in order to protect not only themselves, but their children when they are born. So that data will come out again, over the next 6 to 9 months, probably. I don't think pregnant women are going to be among the first people necessarily to be immunized, although in some cases with some vaccine programs, pregnant women are considered somewhat immunocompromised and more vulnerable, and sometimes they are prioritized. But I don't feel that'll be the case this time.
I want to know which vaccine we will be getting, Pfizer or Moderna. Both are completely different formulas and have different results and reactions. I also want complete transparency on the creation process. How did they arrive at the one that works?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think there is already quite a bit of transparency. You don't have to look further than, you know, the internet to find quite a bit of transparency on both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, and what exactly is in them, and the history of those companies. They both really started out as chronic disease therapeutic companies, and they found, you know, they figured out how to make mRNAs and make them stable, and then applied this technology to COVID-19. They are similar technologies, so they're not identical by any means, but they are very similar, and we would expect the side effects of those to be fairly similar as well. Which one is best? Again, we don't really know right now. We have the data we've got. We are going to, you know, whatever vaccines we can get, we're going to allocate to those who are in most need first, and then go down that priority sequence. So it's going to start off with 1.6 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine, and then 800,000 of the Moderna vaccine, starting in, you know, January through March, and then we're going to get, you know, up to 20 million doses within the next couple months after that, among several other vaccines. So, you know, for the most part, I don't think we're going to have a huge amount of choice, at least if we're in the highest priority group, about what we're going to get. But as time goes on, and as this is applied to the whole population, I think we will have a lot more information, and hopefully we will have some degree of choice, although that will make rolling out the program a bit more complicated.
And just to help people kind of clarify, what do, when you talk about long-term impacts in the context of vaccines, what does that mean?
So, you know, it's understandable when people are putting something into their body that they don't know about, or at least injecting it, that you be concerned about short-term and long-term side effects. But, you know, the vaccines that we have had for you know, over 100 years, but certainly in the past 70 years, we really don't see significant or at all long-term side effects for them. That's just not how they work. There are certainly lots of people who spread a lot of misinformation about vaccines, that there are long-term side effects, but, you know, it really is not true. And there is almost nothing in our society that we actually have better data on than vaccination. You know, billions of doses, billions and billions of doses, that in many countries are tracked rigorously through registries, as are, you know, potential side effects, or what we call AFEs, adverse events following immunizations. And we really track those rigorously, and we simply don't see them. So while I think it's understandable that people are concerned about it, I think they can be reassured that we're just simply not seeing them with the vaccines we have. And, you know, if we do see any signals whatsoever about that in the current crop of COVID vaccines at any time, I think there is going to be transparency around that. I think countries around the world are going to demand, people around the world will demand that of their governments and of these companies. So I'm not that concerned. I'm not concerned at all about the long-term piece.
Since you know, the first thought is herd immunity. The more people that get vaccinated, the better it is for herd immunity. How many people do we need to get vaccinated in order for this vaccine to be effective for everyone?
Mm-hmm. Right. So really what you're asking there is, when are we going to be able to get back to normal? And we're going to be able to go out without our masks and distancing and that. And to be honest, we really don't know. In other words, you know, we have some data about how effective these vaccines are in these clinical trials. We don't know how effective they are in real life. We have every indication that they're quite effective. We also don't know how long they're effective for. And the more effective they are, you know, if they're 95% effective, then, you know, we're only going to need, you know, say 70 to 75% of the population to be immunized in order to have some degree of herd immunity. Whereas if they're somewhat less effective, we're going to need much more of the population to be immunized. So we really don't know the answers to that yet. And honestly, even asking that question now, well, it's certainly on everybody's mind when we get back to normal. We've still got a long way to go. And so there's no question that for the next, you know, 6 to 9 months, we're still going to be doing the masking and the distancing. Hopefully, you know, come March, April, with the most vulnerable people protected, we may not have to worry as much. And that's going to impact our ICUs and our hospitals. And when the capacity there increases, I think we're going to all feel a lot more comfortable and about all the other medical capacity that's going to be restored. But we just don't know the answers to those questions now, and we have a long time to figure those out. And the good news is we can be hopeful about it now.
There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly.
Sorry, there's somebody really wants me to ask.
Sure.
My concern is proof of vaccine, card documentation. How are they, the government, planning to have citizens prove or show that they've been vaccinated without the risk of forging any documents to look authenticated?
Right. So that is a really important question, and that is going to be different in every province. Documenting the vaccine delivery, and who gets it when, and making sure it's done in the right priority, and also being able to do this phase 4 tracking of any potential effects is critically important. And every different province is going to do it their own way. We have a system in Ontario called Panorama that does tracking of vaccinations in public health, and my understanding is we're going to use that in some way. I don't see vaccine passports being used, generally in our society. We think it's not a great idea from a public health perspective. Neither vaccine passports nor sort of I've had COVID, I can go around doing what I want. I think we're going to be wearing masks and distancing, all of us, whether or not we've had the vaccine, for some time to come. Whether that's true of long-term care facilities or not, we're going to have to see about that. But I don't think we're going to get to a situation where we're going to take a silver piece of paper and say, I've been vaccinated and now I can do this, that, or the other. I think there is going to be some kind of process, maybe 6 months from now, once it's into the general population. If you're going to go on a plane, if you're going to go to the theater, there are many companies that have actually already thought about that and designed systems for that. There may be a process for that, and I think we're really going to have to see how things work out. There is no system that we have that's 100% foolproof. But what it does is really relies on us as citizens to be responsible. And that's really the theme with this entire pandemic response overall, is that it's an all of us in this together kind of approach, and we all have to be responsible citizens. And first among that is just honesty.
Do you have any advice for someone who might have more questions about the COVID vaccines and, wants to go to a responsible source to get that information?
I think that, for the time being, information is changing every single day. And I think what I would have to say to people now who have questions about vaccine is patience. For most people who are asking those questions, you're not going to be getting the vaccine in the next month, 6 weeks, probably even 2 or 3 months. And so, keep those questions at hand. Feel free to keep asking those questions. But I think those questions will be answered in due time with a lot more certainty than we have right now.
Perfect. Is there anything else you wanted to add that I didn't ask you about? Anything you think people should know?
No, I think the most important thing is that there's enough to worry about with respect to COVID and its impact on individuals and populations in our economy. And frankly, I think the hopefulness that's been generated by the vaccines that are coming out now is wonderful. And I would hope that people's concern about the vaccine or their questions about it wouldn't interfere with that. I think we do have very responsible public health leaders and authorities and governments in our country, and we're very fortunate about that. And we've done relatively well compared to other countries. And I think we can continue with that confidence and rely and trust authorities that we're going to get a safe and effective vaccine.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking
Great.
the time to speak with me. I appreciate it.
No problem.